Imagine living where every choice, from your hat to your healthcare, is not just tradition, but a command from scripture taken literally. In these communities, obedience isn't weakness, it's a shield forged by the Ordnung. Romans 12:2 is not a slogan in Amish life, it is a blueprint for daily existence. Do not conform to the pattern of this world takes shape in every visible detail, from the muted palette of clothing to the absence of power lines running to the house. The Ordnung, passed down not on paper but by memory, weaves these choices into a fabric that sets the community apart. There are no personal cars parked in the driveways, no telephones ringing in the living room. Instead, horse-drawn buggies line up outside Sunday services, and messages are relayed through shared phone shacks at the edge of the property. Bishop Elias, a leader in one Pennsylvania district, once explained, "Our clothes are not just plain, they are a reminder every morning that we belong to something greater than ourselves." Men wear broad-brimmed hats and suspenders. Women cover their heads with white prayer caps and tie their dresses with straight pins instead of buttons. Jewelry is absent. Even wedding rings are replaced by a simple beard for married men or a black bonnet for married women. The intent is not to erase identity, but to keep pride in check. Full-length mirrors are forbidden, considered a temptation to vanity. Photographs are avoided, so no one stands out or is elevated above the group. The Ordnung dictates not only what can be worn, but what can be owned. Automobiles are seen as a threat to community ties, making it too easy to leave or to outpace one's neighbors. Electricity from the public grid is rejected, not because technology itself is evil, but because it invites the outside world into the home. Television, radio, and the internet are viewed as open doors to influences that contradict the biblical mandate for separation. Even the smallest tools are weighed. A battery-powered lantern may be allowed, but a smartphone is subject to years of debate and in most districts remains off-limits. Obedience is not blind. Every adult member attends the Ordnungsgemeinde, the council meeting held twice a year, where rules are reviewed and affirmed. Change comes slowly, if at all, and only with consensus. The threat of losing unity with neighboring districts looms over each decision. A single family's vote can shape not just their own lives, but the bonds that hold extended kin together across county lines. To outsiders, these restrictions appear suffocating, but for the Amish, they are a living testimony. Each boundary, each act of non-conformity is a physical answer to a spiritual question. What does it really mean to be not of this world? For the Amish, the answer is visible in every stitch, every mile walked, every choice to remain apart. The Ordnung turns scripture into something you can see, touch, and live, an obedience that is not abstract but worn on the body and woven through the day. Twice each year, as spring planting or autumn harvest approaches, every adult member of an Amish district gathers for the Ordnungsgemeinde. The meeting unfolds in borrowed barns or crowded living rooms, with benches drawn close and the air heavy with anticipation. Bishop Elias, a steady presence in his 60s, stands at the center, not as a ruler, but as a guide. The Ordnung is not recited from a book. Instead, it is spoken aloud, point by point, from memory, plain dress, horse-drawn travel, the use of propane lamps, the boundaries around technology. Each guideline is open for review, not as a formality, but as a living contract with the community and with God. The process is slow and deliberate. Members, men and women alike, are invited to voice concerns or propose small changes. Sometimes the discussion lingers on a single detail, the color of a bonnet, the placement of a phone shack, the question of whether solar panels could be allowed for milking machines. Each voice is heard, but the goal is not majority rule. Unity is required. If even one family cannot accept a change, the matter is tabled or withdrawn. The Ordnung must be affirmed by all before the district can proceed to communion, the most sacred event in the Amish calendar. Voting is done by show of hands or quiet assent. There are no ballots, no secret tallies. The risk of fracture is real. A district that moves too quickly or too far risks being shunned by its neighbors, cut off from shared worship, marriages, and the intricate web of kinship that stretches across county and state lines. The memory of past splits lingers. A single disagreement over tractor wheels or battery-powered lights has, in some places, divided families for generations. For this reason, even small changes are weighed with the gravity of a covenant. Districts differ in their Ordnung. What is permitted in Holmes County may be forbidden in Lancaster. Some allow indoor plumbing, others require outhouses. In one community, a cell phone for business use might be tolerated, while in another, even a cordless drill is suspect. These differences are not signs of chaos, but of adaptation, each district shaping its Ordnung to fit its needs, its land, its people. Yet the mechanism for change remains the same everywhere: open discussion, consensus, and the ever-present threat of disunity. Obedience, then, is not imposed from above. It is chosen, reaffirmed twice a year by every adult who chooses to stay. The Ordnungsgemein is both a safeguard and a test. It holds the community together, not by force, but by the shared willingness to submit personal preference to the common good. In this way, the Ordnung remains a living thing, flexible, resilient, and always just one disagreement away from unraveling. Long before dawn, the sound of wagon wheels and bootsteps rolls across the gravel lanes of Amish country. On barn raising day, the quiet of the fields is broken by the steady arrival of buggies, each one delivering men, women, and children ready to work. By 6 a.m., a crowd of over 200 stands gathered at the edge of an empty foundation. The first beam is lifted into place, heavy with the weight of both timber and tradition. No one waits for instructions from a foreman. Instead, the order of the day is known by heart, passed down through decades of practice and reinforced by the Ordnung, which calls for every able hand to join in. Martha Kay, a respected matriarch in her district, moves through the crowd with a clipboard and a calm authority. She checks lists, assigns tasks, and answers questions in Pennsylvania Dutch. Her voice cuts through the morning chill as she directs the kitchen crew, her daughters, nieces, and neighbors who have already begun kneading dough and lighting wood stoves. By mid-morning, the scent of baking bread and brewing coffee drifts from the cook tent, promising hot meals for the workers who will not pause until the ridgepole is set. Logistics are daunting. Lumber arrives by horse-drawn wagon, sorted and stacked by size. Teams of men, some in their 70s, others barely out of their teens, hoist frames and hammer pegs with practiced rhythm. Each group knows its role. Some raise the walls, others set the rafters. A few balance high above the ground, guiding beams into place without the aid of modern cranes. There are no power tools, only hand saws, mallets, and a chorus of voices calling out measurements and encouragement. The work is physical, relentless, and deeply collaborative. By noon, the ridgepole, longest and heaviest of all, is lifted to the top of the frame. This is the moment that draws every eye. The youngest boys and oldest men alike gather to watch, hats in hand, as the final beam is nudged into position. There is a brief pause, a silent prayer, and then the work resumes, faster now, as the skeleton of the barn becomes solid and unmistakable. Throughout the day, Martha Kay keeps her eye on the clock and the weather. She knows that rain could undo hours of effort and that every minute counts. Meals are served in shifts, with plates piled high and laughter rising above the clang of tools. By late afternoon, the walls are up, the roof is half shingled, and the barn stands where there was nothing just 12 hours before. For the Amish, a barn raising is more than construction. It is the Ordnung made visible, obedience, unity, and selflessness hammered into every joint, where modern life often leaves people isolated and dependent on institutions. Here, strength comes from interdependence, from the certainty that no one stands alone. As dusk settles, the volunteers disperse, tired but satisfied, leaving behind a structure that will serve the community for generations. The barn is not just shelter for animals or hay. It is proof that through discipline and shared purpose, an entire world can be built in a single day. A hospital bill arrives at an Amish farmhouse, sometimes for thousands, sometimes for hundreds of thousands. There is no insurance card to present, no policy number to reference. Instead, the family calls the district treasurer, a neighbor elected by the church to manage the health aid fund, a symbol of trust. Within days, word spreads through the congregation. At the next Sunday service, a quiet collection is taken, and the treasurer begins the work of negotiation. Hospitals in Holmes County, Ohio, and Lancaster, Pennsylvania, have come to know the rhythm of these calls. Amish negotiation teams, often led by men like Dan Yoder, approach the billing office with a simple proposition: immediate payment, in full, for a substantial discount. Sometimes the discount reaches 60% off the original charge. Bills that might take insurance companies months to settle are paid in 10 days or less, often with a single cashier's check. The system is built on trust, both among the Amish and between the Amish and local providers. Each member pays into the health aid fund, usually a fixed amount every month. The sum is modest by modern standards, often between $90 and $110 per family, sometimes more in larger districts. The funds are pooled, managed in handwritten ledgers, and reviewed twice a year at the Ordnungsgemeinde. When a need arises, the treasurer consults with church elders and, if necessary, neighboring districts. If the bill exceeds what the fund can cover, a special collection or community auction is organized. No one is left to face a medical crisis alone. The benefits of this approach are quantifiable. Medical costs for Amish families run 40 to 60% lower than for insured Americans. Providers value the speed and certainty of payment. In return, Amish patients receive care without the burden of navigating claim denials, deductibles, or out-of-network penalties. The financial strength of this model lies in its simplicity and transparency. There are no administrative fees, no profit margins, no advertising budgets. Every dollar contributed is a dollar available when disaster strikes. Disaster relief follows the same principle. When fire destroys a barn or illness drains a family's savings, the call for help travels quickly. Within hours, neighboring districts mobilize. Funds are gathered, supplies purchased, and volunteers dispatched. The response is immediate, personal, and precise. No forms to fill out, no waiting for government approval. As one fund treasurer explained, "We trust each other because we see each other every week. If someone needs help, we all know about it, and we all give what we can. That is our insurance." This model comes with its own pressures. The burden of a large bill is shared by everyone, and families sometimes hesitate to seek expensive treatments, knowing the cost will ripple through the community. Yet the system endures year after year because it is rooted in obligation rather than regulation. The strength of the Amish financial model is not only in its numbers, but in the trust that holds it together. Jacob H. was 17 when his Rumspringer began. He traded his straw hat for a baseball cap, borrowed a neighbor's truck, and spent nights at bonfires on the edge of town. For nearly a year, he tasted what the world outside promised: late-night movies, fast food, the easy anonymity of a crowd. But at the end of each week, he returned to the family farm, where the rhythms of milking, planting, and prayer drew him back into the cadence of Amish life. He kept a diary during those months, quiet entries about feeling both invisible and exposed among outsiders, about the weight of choice and the pull of home. He wrote of visiting a city once, standing on a busy street, and realizing he could disappear there without anyone noticing. The freedom felt thin, he said, compared to the dense web of obligations and belonging he knew in his own district. When the time for decision came, Jacob sat with his parents and the church elders. He chose baptism in the summer, kneeling before the congregation in a simple ceremony that bound him, by his own words, to the Ordnung. There was no pressure, no threats, just the expectation that the choice must be real. He was not alone. Across North America, nearly 9 out of 10 Amish youth make the same decision after Rumspringa, returning to a life that outsiders often see as restrictive, but that for them offers a kind of rooted security. This pattern repeats across families. Average households welcome 7 children, sometimes more, each one raised in a world where crime is rare, 1/100th the national average, and divorce is nearly unheard of. The fabric of the community is thick with shared work and mutual reliance, but it is the voluntary nature of commitment that stands out. The freedom to leave exists, but most choose to stay, drawn by a sense of purpose that is hard to replicate elsewhere. For Jacob, the decision was less about rejecting the outside than about embracing something deeper. Gelassenheit, the quiet yielding of self to something larger. It is a concept that will shape his life in ways both visible and hidden, as he learns that strength in this world often means giving up the right to stand alone. Anna L. sat at the far end of her family's kitchen table, hands folded in her lap, while her parents and siblings ate in silence. The rule was clear. Once placed under meidung, or shunning, a baptized member could no longer share meals, join family prayers, or even accept a handshake from those she loved most. The Ordnung demanded this separation, not out of anger, but as a living fence meant to steer her back toward the community she had vowed to uphold. For Anna, the punishment was not theoretical. Every empty chair at a Sunday meal, every conversation that stopped when she entered the room reminded her of the boundary she had crossed. Shunning is applied only after every appeal for repentance fails. Anna's offense was refusing to renounce a forbidden relationship with an outsider. Her parents worried that if they ignored the ban, they too would risk losing their place in the church. The cost of disobedience is never borne by the individual alone. It ripples outward, threatening the entire family's standing. Neighbors who once exchanged baked goods and farm help now looked away as Anna passed. Even her youngest brother, barely old enough to understand, was told not to speak to her unless absolutely necessary. The path back is possible, but not quick. 6 weeks must pass before Anna can petition the bishop for reinstatement. During that time, she is expected to reflect, to show genuine remorse, and to seek forgiveness, not only from the church, but from those she has hurt. For some, the isolation is too much. The ache of separation can last a lifetime, especially if the decision to leave stands. For others, like Anna, the hope of return remains, but the memory of exclusion lingers long after forgiveness is granted. Shunning is designed as a remedy, not a punishment. Yet its emotional toll is undeniable. The Ordnung's strength lies in its ability to bind, but the same ties that hold a community together can also cut deep. For Anna, the lesson was written not in doctrine, but in the quiet spaces between family members, in the meals eaten apart, and in the long wait for a word of welcome. October 2nd, 2006 began as a normal Monday in Nickel Mines, Pennsylvania. At the West Nickel Mines Amish school, children settled into their lessons while mothers worked nearby and fathers tended the fields. By mid-morning, the quiet was shattered. A local milk truck driver, known to the community, entered the one-room schoolhouse armed and desperate. He ordered the boys and adults to leave, barricaded the doors, and held 10 girls hostage. Within minutes, gunfire erupted. 5 girls, ages 7 to 13, died at the scene or in the hours that followed. 5 more were critically wounded. The gunman took his own life before police could intervene. In the hours after the shooting, as ambulances pulled away and state troopers guarded the road, a different kind of response unfolded. The families of the victims, some still in shock, gathered not only to mourn, but to pray for the shooter's wife and children. That very afternoon, members of the Amish community visited the widow at her home, offering comfort and forgiveness. One mother, Mary R., whose daughter had not survived, brought food and words of peace. She later recalled, "We must not think evil of this man. We must forgive as Christ forgave us." The next day, Amish men in plain coats and wide-brimmed hats stood in line at the funeral home, not for their own children, but to pay respects at the shooter's viewing. Several families attended the burial, standing beside the widow and her parents. When the world expected anger, the Amish offered a check for $150,000, funds raised for the shooter's family, so his children would not suffer for their father's crime. This forgiveness was not spontaneous or easy. It was rooted in a lifetime of teaching, in the daily recitation of Matthew 5:39. "If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also." Amish children grow up hearing stories of ancestors who refused to fight back, even when persecuted. The Ordnung, reviewed and affirmed year after year, demands that non-resistance is more than a doctrine. It is a discipline, practiced even when the cost is unbearable. In the weeks that followed, the world watched in disbelief. Letters poured in from across the globe, asking how such mercy was possible. For Mary R. and her neighbors, the answer was simple. Forgiveness was not an option, but a command. To withhold it would be to unravel the very fabric that had held their people together for centuries. In the stillness after tragedy, the strength of the Ordnung became most visible, not in rules or rituals, but in the quiet resolve to answer violence with grace. Every new invention, every tool, every convenience is met with the same question in Amish communities. What will it cost, not just in dollars, but in unity, in faith, in the fabric of daily life? This is not a rhetorical exercise. It is a discipline rooted in the words of Luke 14, where Jesus urges his followers to count the cost before building a tower or marching into battle. For the Amish, this means that technology is never adopted on impulse. Instead, it enters the Ordnungsgemeinde as a point of debate, sometimes for decades. The arrival of the propane stove in some districts, for example, followed nearly 30 years of discussion. The question was not whether it would save time or make life easier, but whether it would alter the patterns of family, the rhythm of meals, the sense of dependence on one another. Cell phones present an even more telling example. As early as the late 1990s, business owners and farmers began pressing for mobile communication, arguing that it was necessary for safety and commerce. Yet the church hesitated. For over 20 years, the debate cycled through council meetings. Would phones bring the outside world too close? Would they disrupt the quiet of the home, the sanctity of the meal, the expectation that news travels at the speed of a horse-drawn buggy? In most districts, the answer remained no, or at best, a cautious maybe. Where cell phones are permitted, their use is often confined to the barn or the workshop, never carried into the house, never allowed to interrupt worship or family time. The process is slow by design. Each proposal is measured against the Ordnung, but also against the lived experience of the community. If a new technology threatens to erode the bonds of mutual dependence, or to introduce pride, competition, or distraction, it is set aside, sometimes for another generation. The goal is not to reject change outright, but to ensure that every change strengthens rather than weakens the ties that hold the church together. In this way, the Amish transform caution into a form of collective wisdom, a steady resistance to the rush of progress, anchored in the conviction that some costs are too great, no matter the convenience gained. Leadership among the Amish does not rise through ambition or campaigning. In each district, when a new bishop, minister, or deacon must be chosen, the process begins with quiet nomination. Any adult male member may be named by his peers, but those nominated are not told in advance. On the appointed Sunday, after worship and a shared meal, the congregation gathers in silence. An elder, often a man who has served for decades, prepares a small table with hymnals, each containing a slip of paper. Only one slip is marked with a verse, and the men whose names have been nominated each select a hymnal at random. The one who finds the marked slip is understood to have been chosen by God, not by popular vote or personal desire. This ceremony, known simply as the lot, is both humbling and absolute. The chosen man cannot refuse the call, and the community accepts the outcome as providence, not politics. This method of selection is more than tradition. It is a safeguard against pride and the concentration of power. No bishop presides over other bishops, and no district answers to a central authority. Each congregation governs itself, adapting the ordnung to its needs, its land, and its people. Disputes are settled locally, and leaders serve without pay or privilege. The absence of hierarchy means that corruption, if it arises, cannot spread unchecked. Decisions are made close to home, with accountability visible and immediate. The commitment to autonomy extends beyond church walls. In 1965, after years of negotiation and legal challenge, the Amish secured exemption from Social Security, arguing that accepting government benefits would violate their religious duty to care for their own. The Supreme Court recognized their claim, and since then, Amish communities have relied solely on mutual aid, refusing welfare, unemployment, and food stamps. The Social Security exemption is not a loophole, but a reflection of a system where responsibility is shared, not outsourced. These structural choices, leadership by lot, local authority, self-reliance, form a buffer against the vulnerabilities of modern institutions. When outsiders look for the source of Amish resilience, the answer is often hidden in the ordinary: a hymnal, a handshake, a decision made in a crowded kitchen rather than a distant office. The strength of the community is not enforced from above, but woven through the choices and commitments of its members, one generation at a time. A quiet demographic revolution is unfolding in North America. While many religious groups shrink and mainstream churches report a 7% membership drop in the last decade, Amish communities are doubling in size every 20 years. Today, their numbers stand at about 400,000. By 2050, sociologists project that figure will reach 1 million, an expansion powered almost entirely by birth and retention, not conversion or outreach. The contrast with the outside world is stark. The average American household has fewer than 2 children, and the national birth rate has fallen below replacement levels. In cities and suburbs, church buildings are repurposed or stand empty. Yet in Amish country, new homes rise beside old barns, and schoolhouses fill with children. The numbers tell a story of continuity that defies national trends. Strength in this context is not measured by influence or public profile, but by the ability to endure and regenerate. Addiction rates hover near 12% in the general population, fueled by disconnection and loneliness. Among the Amish, addiction is nearly unknown, a statistical outlier that has drawn the attention of researchers. The explanation is not a genetic anomaly or a miracle, but a network of mutual obligations, daily routines, and boundaries that hold at the level of the ordinary. A leading sociologist once observed, "The Amish are not a relic of the past. They are a mirror held up to the future we are choosing." Their story raises uncomfortable questions. What if stability is not an accident, but the outcome of deliberate limits? What if the very freedoms that define modern life, such as mobility, anonymity, and choice, are also the roots of its fragility? In the quiet growth of Amish communities, the world is confronted with a living alternative, one that challenges the prevailing assumptions about strength, survival, and what it means to belong. While most of society grows more isolated and anxious, Amish communities built on discipline, mutual aid, and separation double in population every 20 years. Their stability isn't nostalgia, it's a living challenge to modern definitions of freedom and strength. As technology accelerates and loneliness spreads, their quiet endurance raises a question. Is true resilience found in breaking away or in standing apart? The answer, for now, remains quietly unyielding. Share your thoughts below.